Nobody was carrying a purse or a briefcase. And Lucas understood why. He'd heard many stories about people who had survived fires and explosions and collapses. So many times they'd escaped with not a second to spare. If they had stopped for anything, to grab a purse or tie a shoe, they wouldn't have made it. A policeman up ahead was trying to stop people from moving south. "Everyone, please leave this area," he shouted. "It's not safe. Please leave this area and head north." But Lucas kept walking, and nobody tried to stop him. He felt invisible. Ladder 177 had to be one of the first units to get to the towers. That meant they'd be the closest. Lucas was still 3 blocks away when he felt a hand on his shoulder. "Hey," a young policeman said. "Where are you going? Are you lost?" "I need to find—" And before he could get the words out, he heard someone calling his name. "Lucas!" His name rose up over all of the sirens. "Dad!" And there was his dad, pushing through the crowd. He grabbed Lucas and held him tight. For a few seconds, Lucas couldn't hear the sirens. All he could hear was the beating of Dad's heart. Chapter 10. 9:50 a.m. Dad told Lucas that he'd driven to Manhattan from Randall's Island as soon as the first plane hit. "I was going to head right to the scene," Dad said, "but I got the message that you were at the firehouse, so I went there first. Chief said you'd be waiting for me." "I'm sorry," Lucas said. "I just couldn't stay. Dad held up his hand. There was no time to talk, and Lucas got the idea that nothing that had happened before this morning mattered anymore. Not now. Maybe not ever again. "We need to find the guys," Dad said. "I need to get my gear from the truck, and then I'm going to find someone to take you back to the firehouse." Lucas didn't want to go back there, but he didn't argue. "They're not going to be able to put the fires out," Dad said. "This is a rescue operation now. We just want to get all of the people out of there." Dad's walkie-talkie crackled. Muffled voices mixed with static came through. Dad kept switching channels, trying to hear. He swore under his breath. "Nobody can talk to anyone," he said. "These radios have never worked, and now people are totally shut off. Nobody can get through to the men in the towers." They passed a pickup truck. The back was completely smashed, and a jet engine, still smoking, sat on the ground just behind it. The driver's door was open. Someone had been in the car when it was hit and had gotten away. "Lucky," Dad said as he pulled Lucas along, past the truck. 1 mile per hour slower, and the entire cab would have been crushed. There were people sitting on the sidewalks being treated by paramedics. Some were in bad shape. Lucas tried to keep his eyes straight ahead. A woman staggered up to Dad. Her gray hair was soaked with sweat. Her face was bright red with streaks of black under her eyes. She was breathing very hard, her hand on her chest. "Can you help me?" she gasped. "My heart. I came down the stairs. My friends. I don't know where they are. There was so much smoke." Lucas knew Dad didn't want to stop. He wanted to find his crew. "Okay," Dad said in a low and gentle voice. "Don't worry. We're going to get you what you need." He turned to Lucas, pointing to an ambulance a few yards away. "Tell one of the paramedics we need help here." Lucas ran over and told one of the paramedics, then hurried back to sit with Dad and the woman. Dad kept talking to her while they waited. He introduced himself and asked for her name and about her family. The woman was gripping Dad's arm so tightly that her fingernails were digging into his skin. Dad didn't budge. He kept talking to her, trying to calm this person he'd never met and would probably never see again. Finally, the paramedics came. A minute later, they had the woman on a stretcher and into the ambulance. Dad and Lucas continued their search for ladder 177. But suddenly, there was a deep, roaring noise. The ground trembled. Dad stopped short. He looked around. His eyes flew up. He grabbed Lucas by the arm and shouted, "Run!" Lucas had no idea what was happening. But suddenly, there was the loudest noise he'd ever heard. Louder than 100 freight trains. Louder than all those sirens. "What is it?" Lucas cried, his voice cracking with terror. Dad pulled Lucas along, shouting, "Run! Run!" to the people all around. Dad kept looking over his shoulder, pulling Lucas harder, urging him to move faster. They came to a convenience store and Dad pushed the door open. He threw Lucas inside and then called to people just behind them. "In here," he called. "Hurry! Hurry!" Just a few people followed. Then Dad slammed the door shut. "Everyone get down! Cover your heads!" Lucas dove to the ground, and then... whoosh! There was the sound of shattering glass and a powerful blast of hot wind. Minutes passed. Lucas squeezed his eyes shut and covered his ears. His mouth and nose filled with gritty dust. It was hard to breathe. If he hadn't known better, he would have been sure that he was in the middle of a tornado. A boiling hot tornado. And suddenly, the noise and wind stopped. There was silence. Lucas opened his eyes, but he couldn't see anything. All around was pure darkness. For a long moment, he was pretty sure the world had ended, and that he was the only person left on Earth. Chapter 11. It was Dad's voice that broke the silence. "Lucas!" Dad shouted. "Dad!" Lucas rasped, spitting dust from his mouth. "Is anyone hurt?" Dad called. People coughed and hacked and sniffed, but nobody seemed to be badly hurt. Dust was everywhere. It coated Lucas, every inch of him. It was in his nose, between his teeth, stuck to his tongue and to the back of his throat. It wasn't like regular dust. Some of the grains were jagged, bits of ground glass. When Lucas tried to brush himself off, the dust cut into his skin. "I have a light," Dad said in a calm and quiet voice. "I'm going to turn it on. Follow the light and come to me. We're going to stay together. We're all going to be all right." There was a click, and then the glow of a small, yellow circle. It looked like the moon on a foggy night. The air was filled with white, floating dust. To Lucas, it seemed like they were trapped inside a snow globe. There were 4 other people in the store with him and Dad, 2 women and 2 men. The younger of the men came from behind the counter of the store. He worked there. Dad asked everyone their names. "I want everyone to put a piece of clothing in front of your mouth," he told them. "It's not good to breathe this dust." Lee, the store worker, got big bottles of water for everyone and rolls of paper towels. Everyone rinsed their mouths. Dad soaked a paper towel and carefully washed Lucas's eyes and face. Then he helped the others. Catherine, the younger of the 2 women, was crying. The other people comforted her. "What was that?" Catherine sobbed. "Was there another plane? Someone said there was another plane." "No," Dad said. "That was not a plane. I think the top part of the building must have come down." The door was stuck. Dad kicked out the jagged glass that clung to the door frame. He stepped out first, then turned to help everyone through, out of the store. Dad had told them he wanted to move quickly. The 4 strangers started walking, holding hands. But Dad stopped just outside the store, his hand clamped to Lucas's shoulder, staring at the scene of destruction all around them. It seemed to be much worse south of them, where even through the fog of dust, Lucas could see that twisted steel beams and big chunks of concrete filled the streets. Cars were on fire. Fire trucks and ambulances were smashed. A few weak sirens squawked. It sounded like the trucks were crying for help. All around them, people climbed out of windows and doorways. Everyone was coated with the white dust. Lucas thought of a book he'd read on World War II last year. There were pictures of cities that had been bombed and burned to the ground. That's what this scene reminded him of. War. Dad was looking intently south, like he was searching for something. "It's gone," he said, in a soft voice that only Lucas could hear. "What's gone?" Lucas said. "One of the towers," Dad said. "The entire building collapsed." Nothing around them looked like the wreckage of a collapsed 110-story building. Where were the big hunks of glass and steel, the smashed office furniture and computers, the miles of wires and pipes? "Where is it?" Lucas said. There was nothing but dust.